here we have the power plant areas. Earlier we discussed the types of industries. Now we'll talk about the different types of power plant areas. The power plant areas can also be divided into some further categories or parts. Firstly, we have the power plant building itself. What kinds of areas are included in that building? So firstly, we have the fuel material store. The main function or purpose of a power plant, in very simple or layman words, is to convert mechanical energy into finally giving output in electrical energy. So some kind of fuel or raw material will be needed for that. Depending upon the type of power plant, may it be thermal power plant, biomass, or hydel, coal based, that is thermal, we can be dealing with any kind of fuel as a raw material or any solid raw materials. So here, firstly we have the fuel material store. As the name suggests, this is a store area for storing the raw material or fuel with which we'll be generating the power we need. Second, we have the engineering store. We discussed the engineering store earlier also. This engineering store is the same. It is a store area for the different kinds of spare parts that are needed in the different machines or equipment that are included in a power plant. It takes care of the maintenance and repair of the different machines inside the power plant up to the level they can. If the problem arises highly, then the manufacturer or vendor or supplier of our equipment is being contacted. Then we have the loading bay and unloading bay. This is also the same as we discussed. These are used for unloading the materials and transporting it to the designated area. At unloading also, the different types of engineers that are concerned with the materials will be present there to assess its quality and quantity as well. Then we have our fuel handling system. Now these power plants are very large and huge in volume and area. Alright, so we'll need a very complex and efficient fuel handling system as well. The fuel or material that is coming here is in very large or higher quantities. So a system has been installed to handle that fuel so that a less amount of mechanical labor is used in handling the fuel. Alright, so the main purpose of this system is to manage the fuel that we have received and supply it to the designated production area. Then we have the economizer. These are just some components of the power plant, but they are very large, so I'll be treating them as areas here. The economizer is a very essential part of a boiler. The main function of an economizer is to, as the name suggests, is to increase the economy of our equipment. So in simple words, the economizer is used to increase the boiler efficiency. Now the main function of the boiler, as we know, is to convert the water into steam. Hence the economizer here helps us in increasing the efficiency of the boiler itself. So where does the economizer come in? We'll see that in boiler, the gases that are leaving the boiler, the exhaust gases, are at a very high temperature. They generally leave at 200 to 250 degrees Celsius. So if we let these gases, exhaust gases, just leave the exhaust pipe, then we'll be wasting the heat that is produced. So here is where the economizer comes in. So the economizer is installed at that end of the exhaust, where it uses the heat from those exhaust gases to preheat the feed water. Now the feed water that is to be fed inside the boiler for converting it to steam is already at a very normal or cooler level. So passing it through the economizer using the temperature of exhaust gas, we can preheat the water and increase the efficiency of the boiler. A good economizer will increase its efficiency from 3 to almost 5%. Alright. The next is the boiler. This is the most essential equipment that can be there in a power plant. The main function of a boiler is to convert water into steam. The steam produced by the boiler will then pass on to the turbine, which will be used for generating our electrical energy. Okay. Then we have the ESP. ESP simply means the Electrostatic Precipitator. Now, we can simply say ESP is an air pollution control device. Now, the gases that are leaving the boiler are very pollutive gases. So, at the end of that, ESP, that is Electrostatic Precipitator, is being installed. These are generally zinc or copper plates, where the materials from these pollutive gases are being deposited. That is, the carbon leaving these pipes is being intercepted by the ESP. After that, using, as the name suggests, using static electricity, these components are shook off from these plates. They are generally ash or soot. So from these components, the ash is collected at the down part of the boiler, and fly ash bricks are made from them. That is a byproduct which we don't need or use. These are mainly a part of the thermal or biomass power plant. Alright. So the main function of an ESP is to control air pollution of the gases leaving our boiler. Alright. Then we have the turbine. The steam that is generated from our boiler is then directed towards the turbine blades, wherein the turbine, after being under pressure due to the steam, will move. An alternator is coupled with the turbine, which will help us in power generation. It is a very simple process. Now, this is not entirely the case for all the power plants. Suppose the power plant is not a standalone area in the industry. For example, an industrial campus has a power plant as well as it has to do some kind of other production. Then the industry itself will need some power. Alright. It is called a cogeneration power plant. In that case, some amount of steam from the boiler will be sent to the industrial area for the utility purposes, and the remaining steam will then be used on the turbine for power generation. So this is a composite kind of model in some industries or some industrial campuses, whereas if it is an exclusive power plant, then all the steam that is generated from the boiler is used for our power generation. Okay. Then we have the air compressor. This is again a component used for our power plant, it is power generation. We have water systems. We have water systems for taking care of our water needs for the campus. For that we have a UGT. In rare cases we also have OST. We then have a firefighting system. The firefighting system will be installed all across the campus as per the norms that are provided by our local governing authority. Then we will have a control room. Now, as big as the power plant it may be, with the advancements in technologies, now the entire power plant can be controlled from a single computer screen. That is the control room. The power plant, once set up, can be operated completely through the control room, wherein the different types of controls for our ST panels, LT panels, all the DGs that are there, the different components of the power plant building itself, all of that will be centrally controlled from our control room. Then we have the ST panel room and the LT panel room, which is used for our initial power production, that is for feeding in the electrical supply we need for running the power plant itself. Okay. Then we have our UPS room. It supplies us with the uninterrupted power supply, takes care of our electrical needs whenever and wherever needed. This brings us to the end of the power plant building itself. Now we have our outdoor utilities. As I mentioned earlier, in any kind of industry, its function will always determine the type of production area and process area, but the utility area will always be the same. So as we discussed earlier, the outdoor utilities are the transformers, the DG sets. These takes care of our electrical supply, power supply. Then we have the cooling towers, we have the tank farm, we have ETP and STP. All of these components have been discussed earlier, so I won't be repeating them. Alright. Then we have the infrastructural area. These are also the same. In power plant also, roads are needed for transportation, a stormwater drainage is needed, street lights are mandatory, a weighing bridge will be needed. Weighing bridge will be needed for the fuel material that is we are receiving. Then the other buildings will be the admin block, the security cabin. These are the same. Now a central workshop will be there in power plant areas. In this central workshop, different kinds of tests are being done, wherein different kinds of processes are always being played around in order to increase the efficiency if we can. Okay. Then we have the canteen, and finally we have the training center. Power plant is a mecca for all the electrical engineers as well as mechanical engineers. So many of our young graduates or fresh graduates are put inside the training center, wherein they learn the entire processing and operation of the power plant. They also learn the maintenance of the power plant. So an exclusive training center is generally built in any kind of power plant. Alright. So this brings us to the end of the different kinds of areas that are there in a power plant. Moving on to the next slide. These are some of the power projects that have been done by us. The first one is the core. It is now owned by Nirma as of present. Then we have the Abalone Energy, and finally we have the Zydus substation switchyard. Alright, these are some of the snippets of the projects that are done by us in this sector. So this brings us to the end of this category or this sector of projects, that is the industrial projects. In this sector, we saw the different kinds of areas that are involved in an industry. We saw what kind of activities are carried out in those areas. We discussed about the different kinds of operational areas, utility block areas, the infrastructural areas, as well as the admin buildings and canteens. We discussed the different types of areas that are inside any kind of power plant. Alright. So moving on to the next sector.
Udemy, shaping professionals for a better future. Udemy is aiming to be the world's largest learning platform for engineers and architects. Udemy will help you to develop your skills in project design and management, to become team leaders and project managers in mega structure projects. Udemy provides learning by high-quality video lectures in all sectors like power, industrial, commercial, institutional, residential, etc., based on 1,000 plus real projects done by our group on Udemy.com. To study in detail with books, drawings, articles, and catalogs, visit Hokicart.com. Please like, share, and subscribe our channel to stay updated on our latest contents.